getting into the injury report, not practicing today was a lot of people. So the 49ers got really beat up by that Browns defense. Christian McCaffrey with his oblique was not practicing. Deebo with his shoulder was not practicing. Trent Williams with his ankle was not practicing. Aaron Banks was also not practicing. Limited was Isaiah Oliver with his knee. And then George Odom, who had a quad injury during the game, was full go today in practice. So with those like injury updates, I wanted to start off with Christian McCaffrey. It is actually really good news that it's an oblique injury. Originally, people thought maybe it could be a rib injury, and Kyle Shanahan was being kind of coy with if they got the MRI or not. Which obviously they got the MRI the day that they landed back in Santa Clara, but I think Kyle wants the Vikings to prepare for Christian McCaffrey. Defensive coordinators have spoken a lot about how they spend a lot of their time making sure to plan to defend against Christian McCaffrey. So for as long as the 49ers can put off that he might be playing, that's more time that the Vikings are preparing for Christian McCaffrey and not for someone else. Now, with an oblique injury, he can play. I have a theory that I think he should not play not only against the Vikings, but I don't think he should play against the Bengals in the next week either. There's a bye week after that, and I think getting a fully recovered Christian McCaffrey coming out of the bye week, that's going to be week 10. That'll set him up for hopefully a healthy playoffs, and you'll get like a fully revamped, rested Christian McCaffrey, which I think is very necessary. He's been utilized a ton. Larry Krueger today asked Kyle Shanahan about his 400 touches that he's received in just the beginning part of the season, and Kyle Shanahan said that he sees no problem with Christian McCaffrey's usage and does not want to slow down, which is why I would recommend holding him out. I think if they end up playing him, I don't think Kyle can only give him 10 touches. I think if he's able to go, Kyle will utilize him to the fullest extent. So I would recommend him sitting out. Also, US Bank turf, which is like the turf that the Vikings play on, which is where the 49ers are going to be playing on Monday night. It has led to a lot of injuries this year. Justin Jefferson, the Vikings' main player, is out with an injury for his hamstring, but they said that his foot got caught in the field, and that's what caused that pole that injured his hamstring that now has him out, which, by the way, I'm under the impression that the 49ers are definitely going to beat the Vikings. They are 30th in run efficiency. They do not run the ball well at all. They're middle of the road on their offense, but it's all their passing game. And I think those stats are going to be pretty skewed because they're all from games where Justin Jefferson is playing. And much like the Rams in 2022, where their entire offense was kind of going to Cooper Kupp, that's how the Vikings are. Their entire offense runs through. It's just throwing it down the field and, hoping and praying that Justin Jefferson can make an amazing play, which he can. He's a great wide receiver, but he's injured right now. So I am not worried about the game coming up on Monday. Now, I don't want to be too confident because I wasn't worried that much about the Browns either. And clearly we have to eat our words for that. But because of the turf field, that not only took out Justin Jefferson, but also when the Chiefs just recently played there, Travis Kelce injured his foot on the turf, and Mike Williams from the Dolphins tore his ACL on the turf. So that's three major injuries where players are out for either the entire season or 6 weeks, all based on that turf. I was listening to a crossover podcast that Brian Peacock had on his channel, where a Vikings journalist came on, and they actually said that the turf has been deemed like unplayable, and the league is making sure that they roll out new turf at the end of this season. But because of that turf is very dangerous. Like if the league is forcing them to change it, and I don't know if I would say it's as bad as MetLife. I know that the Jets turf gets a lot of criticism, but with all those major injuries, I would definitely be holding a lot of these players out. So obviously Christian McCaffrey is an oblique, so that's not as bad as like a lower body injury. But when you're getting hit like running backs do, that's like a car crash every single time on your side. And even if it's just a pain tolerance issue, I feel like it would be way more intelligent to hold Christian McCaffrey back for a little bit, make sure he's fully rested up, So with his oblique injury, I would recommend sitting him, but he is currently up for potentially playing. Now, Deebo Samuel has a shoulder injury. He was on the Kay Adams podcast. He goes on every week with her, and he made it sound like it wasn't that big of a deal. Now, to be fair, he kind of downplayed it, and when they brought it up was when she brought up CJ Gardner-Johnson, who is also on IR, but was making fun of Deebo for being on IR. So I don't know if Deebo was like, oh, I'm fine, in a more defensive sense, just kind of responding to Gardner's comments, which if you didn't hear about that, CJ Gardner-Johnson is a safety for the Lions. And before the Browns game, the 49ers got in a fight with them. Deebo Samuel pushed a guy and then kind of moved out of the way, and Trent Williams pushed him and sent him flying. And CJ Gardner-Johnson quote tweeted that on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, and was like, oh, Deebo was running and making Trent Williams do his work for him. So they kind of had been going back and forth on social media. I think Gardner-Johnson should be back for the playoffs. So if the Lions make the playoffs, the 49ers will definitely meet them, and that could be an interesting storyline then. It's not super important now, but like I said, on the Kay Adams podcast, when Deebo had to listen to those comments about Gardner making fun of him for one being a running back, which we can get into if you guys are interested. Deebo Samuel's numbers as a wide receiver are really low this season. And maybe if they do hold Christian McCaffrey back going into this Vikings game, a smart plan could be to have Deebo run the ball more if he is a go. Now he does have a shoulder injury. I think that's probably a little less harsh than an oblique injury. So I'm not sure if they would hold him out. Or I'm under the hypothesis or under the impression that Kyle will probably want either Deebo or CMC to go. I don't think he'll want to hold out both of them. I would recommend holding out both of them because right now the 49ers have Jordan Mason, Ray McCloud, who can make up for that Deebo role. They have Ayuk and they have George Kittle. That if you compare those offensive weapons to the offensive weapons on the Vikings, the 49ers, even holding out Christian McCaffrey and Deebo, still have better offense. So I think that they should be able to hold out with them. Whether or not they will or not exactly sure. So, but anyways, so Deebo has a shoulder where he was not practicing today. We're not sure if he's going to be held out. I would recommend holding him out, not necessarily because of the field, because I know upper body won't have much to do with the field, but I just think if there's any pain tolerance, anything that they're fighting through with a whole week plus an extra day to plan, that Kyle Shanahan should be able to scheme a good offensive game plan without utilizing Deebo. Also, Ray McCloud was pretty hard on himself after the game and said that he was not prepared to take over for that Deebo role, which he did an excellent job last year at taking over for the Deebo role. A lot of those screen passes that because Deebo was kind of out of shape, he didn't get as many yards as he normally did. Ray did a good job at stepping in. Now, last week against the Browns, it was very clear not prepared. There was one play where it was schemed wide open if he would have went the wrong way, but he just ran into Trent Williams instead. And after the game, Kyle kind of said that some of the backups were not prepared. And then there was reports that Ray McCloud said that he was not prepared for that game plan. But I hope that was okay. It just went out for a little. Very prepared for the Vikings game, and that he could fill in for Deebo. And if Kyle got Kittle more involved and Ayuk more involved, because the Vikings cornerbacks are nowhere near as efficient as the Browns cornerbacks are, I think that both Deebo and Christian McCaffrey could be held out, and that the 49ers should have no problem winning. Next injury update, not practicing, was Trent Williams with his ankle. And and this is kind of scary, but I maybe think, I'm interested, I'll check the comments in a second and talking to you guys. I maybe think that they should hold Trent Williams out. He struggled a lot with his ankles last year. He had a normal ankle sprain, and then he ended up getting a high ankle sprain towards the end of the year. He also struggled with ankle injuries in 2021. So poor guy's going to retire and not be able to walk on his ankles because he's had ankle injuries every year. But like I said, with the turf, I think you want to be extremely careful, especially with lower body injuries, because you have to really plant and like dig your feet in, especially as an offensive lineman. You're like pushing off. So you're putting all your weight on your feet and your ankles and that lower body. I think doing that against or doing that on that turf field that has already injured so many players, I'd be very hesitant. It's scary to go into a game without Trent Williams, but if you think about it in the way, okay, if something happens with his ankle, it's a high ankle sprain, or maybe he twists his knee because he's trying to stabilize that ankle, he could end up being out for way more important games down the line. So it might actually be better to hold him out, grid it out for one game. I think Jalen Moore would come in his place, and this would be something that Kyle Shanahan would just have to scheme around. Obviously, Jalen Moore being your starting offensive lineman, not ideal. We're going to get into some trade targets later on. I do think that the 49ers should make a trade for the offensive lineman position. Now, anyone they're going to trade for at this point is not going to be the best offensive lineman ever. That's the reason that they would be available. And obviously, Jalen Moore isn't going to be the best ever. That's why he's a backup. But just not, I would play, if possible, I would play Trent Williams against the Bengals next week because that's going to be at Levi's. We can have a lot of criticisms for Jed York, but luckily that field is a very good field. But yeah, I would hold him out against the Vikings just because of that turf with that ankle. O-lineman Aaron Banks also was out with an ankle, so that's kind of scary. I didn't even remember in the game him having an issue, but reports were that they think that he's going to be able to play, but he didn't practice at all, so it wasn't even like he was limited. He didn't practice at all. The other player that was limited, so he did practice but not fully participating, is Isaiah Oliver with his knee, and once again, lower body injuries. My brain is thinking, should they hold out Isaiah Oliver against the Vikings with that turf field? But then that's terrifying because the guy who would come in for him is Ambry Thomas, and legitimately every time Ambry Thomas has been on the field this year, they have given up an immediate touchdown. So that's definitely not ideal. I'm gonna get to some comments